Shout out to Alana Trotman for sending me this story, and you already know who that is right there on the left, but if you don't know who that man is on the right, this man's name is Michael Biden, I believe, or is Michael, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he is the he was a former New York medical examiner, and he has worked on plenty of cases before, such as the OJ case. He's worked on, I believe, JFK, and I believe he also worked on Prince. And he basically came out and said that there's no way that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide like the media has been putting it out there. And they truly believe this man was killed by strangulation. And that's what we've been saying for pretty much since we got news that he died in that cell back in August, because everything just wasn't adding up to just it being a suicide, even though he was on suicide watch. But I'm going to go ahead and read this article. It says, millionaire sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's bore telltale signs of homicide by strangulation and not suicide, according to leading forensic pathologists. In a bombshell interview on Fox and Friends, Dr. Michael Biden shared his conclusions about the suspicious nature of Epstein's death after the financier was discovered dead in his cell on August 10th. The former New York City medical examiner, who was hired by Epstein's brother and present at the autopsy, shared that the findings are more consistent with homicidal strangulation. At the autopsy on day one, there was findings that was unusual for suicidal hanging and more consistent with ligature homicidal strangulation. Biden described how the 66-year-old financier had 2 fractures on the left and right of his larynx around the Adam's apple. Epstein also had a fracture on the left hyoid bone that is above the Adam's apple. Those 3 fractures are extremely unusual in suicidal hangings and could occur much more commonly in homicidal strangulation. Biden, who's worked on cases involving O.J. Simpson, President John F. Kennedy, Phil Spector, Aaron Hernandez, and more, said that the 3 fractures were rare. The 85-year-old forensic pioneer added, "I've not seen in 50 years where that occurred in a suicidal hanging case." Biden has an extensive career examining more than 20,000 bodies. He's even hosted HBO's Autopsy. The pathologist's findings are at odds with New York medical examiner Barbara Sampson's ruling that Epstein died from suicide by hanging. "It appears that this could have been a mistake," Biden said. "There's evidence here of homicide that should be investigated to see if it is or if it is not homicide." I'm going to tell you this right now. They ain't going to investigate it. They going to sit there and say that they did, but they really aren't. Because they know who killed that man. They didn't want him to talk. Biden described that a person weighing 120 pounds with a head weight of 10 pounds would have had 110 pounds of pressure on the neck at the jaw during a hanging. However, the pathologist described that double or triple the pressure could be applied to the neck if a person was to squeeze. He added that there was also hemorrhages in Epstein's eyes that were consistent in homicide strangulation, yet uncommon but not unheard of in strangulation cases. Biden said the prominent hemorrhage in the soft tissues of the neck next to the fracture is evidence of a fresh neck compression that could have caused the death. The pathologist asserted that a conclusion could not be reached until the independent study was completed. The investigation is not completed until all the information has come in. A sheet that had been twisted was used as the ligature placed on Epstein's neck. Biden said that evidence on the cloth may provide insight into the details surrounding the sex offender's death at the Metropolitan Correctional Facility. Whoever it is would have their DNA all over the ligature, he said. "We don't have those results yet." This person could have easily worn gloves to hide their DNA. Biden declared that the results should be reported quickly to give an idea and lessen the speculation. Biden noted that Epstein had been placed on suicide watch after he was found on the floor of his prison cell on July 23rd with marks around his neck. After being taken off suicide watch, he was placed in a cell with a roommate who was eventually removed. And on the day of his death, Biden described that there was a total breakdown in procedure experienced by prison security. It was determined that the 2 guards who were supposed to be working in that area of the prison had allegedly fallen asleep and hadn't made their 30-minute rounds for more than 3 hours. Security cameras in the facility were also compromised. Bynes shared that Epstein's brother and family wanted answer, prompting his hiring. He added that if the death was a homicide, he and others may be at risk because of somebody not wanting knowledge given out. The brother is concerned that if he was murdered, then other people who have information might be at risk in jeopardy. The forensic mainstay described Epstein's death as not a typical hanging case. Questions remain as to why the high-profile pedophile was taken off suicide watch so soon after this July suicide attempt, and why he was not being properly monitored by MCC employees at the time of his death. His death prompted outrage and disbelief over how such a high-profile prisoner known for socializing with powerful people, including Presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, could have left without surveillance at the federal facility. We are pretty much on the same wavelength. Like, there's no way that anyone could sit up here and tell me that this man killed himself. Because a lot of the stuff that's been read in this article, I read when the news broke out that they did find him dead. Like the removing of the roommate, the guard supposed to be sleeping for that particular 30 minutes, and them taking him off suicide watch, and then he's dead with the next week or the next week and a half. Like, it's a lot of moving parts that just doesn't add up. And now he's probably going to be in fear of his life because this is such a high profile case and they don't want anyone figuring out who did it. But it's somebody up there on the higher ups that wanted Jeffrey Epstein out of there because he was about to spill the beans. He was about to let it all rip. Like, all these names was about to come out in that little black book or whatever it is that he kept those names in. And they had to make sure to make that he stay quiet. And that's exactly what they did. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.